Good afternoon, Richard.
Good afternoon.
My name is Jan Hicks, and I'm an interviewer with the Library of Congress and Augusta-Richmond County Historical Society program, World War II Veteran History Program. I'm one of the interviewers. I'm here with our World War II veteran, and it is Richard Ebezine Watson. It is a very warm June 23rd, 2010, and we are at his home, and I thank you for having me in, Richard.
Thank you.
Richard, where were you born,
Wheeling, West Virginia.
and when?
Well, when is May the 9th, 1924. 86.
Did you, congratulations, you look wonderful. Did you also grow up in that area?
Yes, I was raised in Wheeling until I went in the service. That's where I stayed.
Did you have a lot of brothers and sisters?
I had one sister.
Would you describe your life as country life or city
No,
life?
city life.
City life?
Yes.
What was it, near one of the large cities in West Virginia?
Yes, it was. Well, Wheeling was a mid-sized city. When I was growing up, it was fairly large. It was a steel center and coal mines. And in the neighborhood, I was in a neighborhood called Warwood, and it was a suburb of the city. It was roughly 5 miles from town. But we were connected with streetcars, so that's where we got around.
What did your dad do? Did he work
He was
with
a
his mine?
superintendent of auto maintenance for the city of Wheeling.
Was Mom a stay-at-home mom?
Yeah, she took care of the money.
Say, did you have any uncles or maybe your dad or a granddad who ever served in the military when you were a boy? Do you remember hearing stories about that?
No.
Where did you go to school then?
I went to West Virginia, or Warwood High School in Warwood, of course, the elementary and all that. Actually, mid-school was located in Warwood too, but I ended up in high school. Graduated in 42.
So when Pearl Harbor was attacked, you were a senior.
Yes.
Do you remember thinking what that would mean to you eventually
Oh,
then?
yeah. I was in the paper. I delivered papers, so I could see the news every day. In fact, that helped me to try to get into the Navy, because about that time they started listing the people who got killed in service, starting in early 42. Of course, there's a war going on. This is local people. Of course, that list got longer, and most of them are all Army.
Were you just sort of waiting until your number came up,
Yeah.
kind of deal, the following year?
I got a year out of 42 to 43. Got a year working and getting ready for it.
Had the war not come along, what had been your plans after high school?
Go in business. I had an offer from a person to start up making a pot outfit manufacturer. He had a small bottling plant, but that didn't pan out because sugar, there's a sugar ration, so he couldn't make it.
Of course, had there not been a war, the sugar rationing wouldn't have been in effect,
no
and you
problem.
never know what might have happened. Well, what did you do right after high school then?
I went to work. My dad got me a job with the city as an electrician in the electrical department of the city, and which consisted of changing light bulbs and street lights, and that's about it.
And at some point, the Army wrote you about
I
being
got
drafted?
Yeah, I got draft notice in May of 43.
So you'd been out of high school just 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So this was very shortly after your 18th birthday
Yeah.
when it came in. What did your parents think about that? I mean,
Well, they went
Not
on.
much they could do.
You know, that was the name of the game. But then everybody's waiting their time.
Were you excited about this? Were you bummed out about it?
You
or-
know, it's expected. You know, everybody, my age group and all were. In fact, a few of my high school people went with me down there in my induction.
So where did you head for boot camp?
Well, we were sworn in the Navy, and then we showed in at boot camp roughly in June of '43. Stayed there 8 weeks, and
This was at Great Lakes Naval Base.
in Illinois.
Had you ever been, I guess you could say,
That's the first
out
time
west?
First time I was ever out of the city. You know, we had relatives in Petersburg, West Virginia. We could just go down there, but that's as far as we ever went.
Yeah. How did you get out there? By a train or?
Train, it had good train service. You go anywhere on a train.
So after that, you had a service school, and what did you learn to do in that? Of course, this was the Navy.
Yeah, Navy Service School,
Mhm.
Purdue University, and electrician May School. And you learn electricity for 16 weeks. And once you got through, they promoted you to fireman first class. When you got through boot camp, you was seaman second class. But fireman was a engineer designation. So it had a red stripe instead of a white stripe on your uniform.
Richard, had you gone beyond the changing light bulb stage working for your dad? Why is it that you ended up just coincidentally in
No, that's
in
what he
electricity?
Yeah, I worked in a different department than him. He just got me, got me the job. Of course, you can get a job anywhere, almost, during that time because all the people go in the Army.
I mean, the fact that you were working in the electrical department and now you were becoming an electrician's mate.
Yeah. Well, that's probably when I, put my resume down, the personnel people saw that, so they thought that was a good place to send me.
Good match. Did you enjoy that kind of work?
Oh, yeah.
And they took you from basic classes on what electricity is to wiring circuits, or?
Well, they didn't. They gave us basic. Once I got on a job, they didn't troubleshoot much, and just give you basics. And the Navy way of assigning numbers to cables, and the cable, all the ship's cables were exposed, and they had a system of numbering, and so you learned all that.
So at some point you were assigned to a ship.
Yeah. Went to San Diego, Balboa Park, stayed there for a month. Was assigned to mess cooking for a month. In the Army, though, they never do that to you, hopefully. But anyhow, I was assigned there for a month. Wasn't bad. They had so many people working on it, and you actually had not much to do.
Now when you
So-
say working on it, you mean working on a ship?
No, working on this mess cooking.
Oh, I
The
see.
KP
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
kind of thing. The Army's KP.
mm-hmm.
But they did have an advantage. You got liberty every night. You go into town. And the other people that wasn't that, every other night they had to go to Liberty.
So
Liberty was what they call getting off a base.
a pass. Uh-huh.
Pass, yeah.
Uh-huh. And this was out in San Diego.
San Diego.
Is this where you first then were assigned to a vessel?
Yes. Can I get
Yeah,
that?
go ahead.
Can you stop? Where was I?
You were going to tell me about your boat.
Got assigned to the LCI, G463. LCI stands for Landing Craft Infantry, and the G stands for gunboat. A landing craft infantry is a a vessel about 100 feet long, about 20 feet wide. It consists of 2 troop compartments, one of which is for the crew and the other one is for troops. It's designed to haul 100 people, 100 troops, and put them on the shore at flat bottom, so it drives right into the shore and drops the troops off and then makes back off. It's propelled by 8 engines. They're actually diesel truck engines put into 2 quads. In other words, 4 engines in a quad. Two engines face each other, and they're joined by a clutch for each engine so they can be disengaged. And the engines are fastened to a reduction gear which drives 2 screws. And it had no reverse on the ship, and so they had adjustable screws so that you can adjust the screws. So if you want to go in reverse, you just adjust the pitch on the screws, and that's how they reverse the ship. It had on the rear of the ship that had an anchor tied to a winch, and then when they went to the shore, they would drop this anchor some distance out, and then the anchor would take hold, and as they went to the beach, when they wanted to get off the beach, then they crank up this winch and pull their anchor back, and that would pull the ship off the shore. We didn't use it, but it was there. The crew was 4 officers and about 21 men. 4 officers. The captain was a Lieutenant J.G. and had 3 ensigns was his helpers. The captain was a school teacher, and he was from West Virginia, which is helpful. When you're from West Virginia, because apparently we take care of each other, take care. The exec officer was an ensign. Of course, he was a former shoe salesman, and the engineering officer was a industrial engineer. I think he just graduated from school. And then the other officer, I don't know what he was. He's a graduate of something. Anyhow, the shoe salesman was there's nothing wrong with that, because during the Depression, if a shoe salesman was a job, no matter how much education you had. So that's pretty much describes.
Was a gunboat ocean-worthy then?
Oh yeah.
Was it a pretty good ride, or?
Yeah, it's rough. Well, it was smooth. I mean, the Pacific is pretty smooth. We never got any storms.
You convoyed over several
Yeah.
gunboats over to Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, it was a flotilla of about 5 boats, or ships, whatever you want to call them. And the flotilla commander was a lieutenant commander, and he's the one that we followed. They followed get in our line, and we followed him. Wherever he went, that's where we went.
So if he went around in circles, everybody went around in circles.
Right. We're just like a bunch of ducks. So that pretty well describes the ship.
Mm-hmm.
The crew, the engineering crew, which I belonged to, the electricians made, and about myself and about 5 others who were, they were motor mechanics. In other words, they were diesel mechanics. And our chief was a first-class motor mech, and he was an older guy, about 30 or so, which we thought was old. And he was a sergeant. He was a first class, and we had no problems. I had to do my tour on the engine room when we're underway. We had to work during the day, and then we had a pull shift on the in the engine room at night. So I generally got to 12 to 2 or 2 to 4 in the late shifts. Anyhow, he didn't have much to do except make sure that the engines are running and the RPMs is right. That pretty well describes the ship.
This was about a 1 week trip over to Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, we went from San Diego, went to Long Beach, and then did some work on a ship, and then we went to Pearl Harbor.
How did you take the sea travel, Richard?
Hmm?
How did you take to sea travel?
No problem.
Oh.
Never got seasick a day in my
Oh my gosh.
life. So, no problem. Some
And-
people got seasick. Along the shore, if you get close to the shore, there's some waves that, if you get in that troughs, then the ship does do a lot of rocking. But I never got sick.
From Pearl Harbor, then you headed out to the Marshall Islands. Describe what did you carry when you went out there, and
Well, we went to Marshall's and we picked up, I'd say, about a dozen Marines. And then we went to Marshall Islands. Is many, many islands. And so we went from island to island. They would spread out. The Marines would go ashore and spread out and just go from one end of the island to the other to make sure that no Japs around, and they didn't find any. Sometimes we go, and some of the crew would go just get off the ship and just get in a line and go across the island.
so I take it when you did this, you were armed?
Yeah, we had carbines, and never seen a carbine in my life. So we didn't know how to fire, so it's a good thing.
This was May, June timeframe, is that right?
Yeah.
Of 40, I guess at 44 by then.
Yeah,
And you had further missions on Saipan and Tinian and Guam.
yeah, invaded. Went to, Marshall went to Saipan, invaded on the 15th of June, 44. When invasions was, we would line up side by side, fairly distant from each other, and we would go in for the first wave of the Marines. We go in close enough to fire our rockets, and we'd fire the rockets and shoot a few rounds from the guns. I never saw any of this because I was in the engine room, but I did. When we fired the rockets, we'd always go backwards. The ship would go backwards because of the force of the rockets. After that, we just, after we were fired off our rockets, then the Marine Amtracs, and after that, then the boats would come in and then drop off the troops.
From Richard, from the engine room, when your rockets fired and when you fired your guns, was this a deafening noise in the engine room, or could you
Well,
even hear?
when you get in the engine room, we do a tour in the engine room for 2 hours. When you come out of the engine room, you couldn't hear. So it's deafening. You know, there's 8 engines, going wide open. And no sounding. And then, in those days, they didn't use any earplugs, nothing. They just have this hazard of the duty.
Did you have hand signals that you communicated with each other, or did you just get close enough to
You always
scream?
got it by yourself. There's nobody down there.
Oh, I see.
But you could talk, you know, you don't yell, and you could still talk to people. And of course, they had the signal of the engine room was, you know, at different speeds, was done by mechanical thing. But I was never in the engine room when they, you know, had to change the speeds, because the mechanics took care of the motor mechs took care of that.
Did the captain of the boat have a capability of communicating to the engine room?
No, other than the signal. The signals, that's all. Nothing, no phone or anything.
So did you do approximately the same general mission on Saipan and Tinian and Guam? It was a
Yeah,
regular process then that you would go through?
yeah,
Was there usually opposition against your ship?
no. They waited, they were dug in, and they waited till the people got ashore and close enough and got range, and then they started firing. And usually, they had high hopes when they got on there. For the first couple of days, it's going to be a picnic and a walk. But it turned out it wasn't so. Because they had to dig them out. And, of course, you can see all the films, all that stuff, how they did paint floors and all that stuff to take them out.
So the
When we, after Guam, we went to Guadalcanal for more rocket launchers. So when we got down there in Guam, in Guadalcanal, we just went down there to get refitted with those rocket launchers. The only event that thing was crossing the equator, and the Navy has their ceremony, and we went through all that.
did you have to put on a grass skirt or anything?
No. There's I think there was only one person on the ship that had ever gone across the equator. So the ones that celebrate are the ones that cover. It's like I guess in a real ship with a lot of people, they're old timers. Well, they had quite a procedure. It's like a frat house initiation or something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But we didn't. We just went through the exercise. They gave us a paper. We crossed.
Mm-hmm. Richard, how long did you normally linger then around an island after you did the?
A couple, 3 weeks.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes.
And so you would move troops to and from the island then?
No, we didn't do
or
anything.
just the initial
Just stand by.
bombardment?
They had a bad feature of that about day 3. The bodies started rotting, and you smell of death, I guess you call it. It's kind of rough. And if you don't get ashore, then it depends on how the wind is blowing. But I guess they had a lot of, and we also had a lot of people drown. They'd be floating around out there too. Sometimes the boats would get on a sandbar, and then they'd be out, about before the shore, and they drop down the deck, and the people drop off into 6 or 7 feet of water, and then all that packs couldn't swim, so they had that problem.
Well, Saipan was in mid-June, and Guam was later in June,
Mhm.
and then Peleliu was in September.
Yeah,
Were you out in that area doing this kind of mission pretty much for the whole summer?
yeah. And we went back to Lilithi. I don't know if I mentioned that or not, but anyhow, Lilithi was a group of islands which had a good anchorage to it. It was protected by islands around it, and they could protect it to keep subs and stuff from coming in. They gated it off. Anyhow, before an invasion, they would always meet there and be all kinds of battleships and destroyers and aircraft carriers, be hundreds of ships. But at one time, a small sub got in there and sank a tanker, and that was kind of busy for a while.
Richard, what was the most dangerous part of what the gunboat mission was?
I don't know. I guess we're small enough we didn't have to worry about submarines because nobody wastes a torpedo on a small ship like that. They never fired on us. They did. One part of our group went up to Truro, and they fired them on up there, and they shot them up pretty bad. So I think that's one reason why we had to go back to Pearl, because they had to get those people fixed. So, but they didn't, as far as I know, they didn't fire a shot at us at all.
How about accidents? I mean, was it a kind of dangerous
No.
on a ship that size? And
Mm. I mean, you know, we had all salt water for showers, and had to wash your clothes in salt water, and made it kind of rough. You know, they have no laundry service in the Navy. You do your own laundry, and that's my entire experience in the Navy was do my own laundry. And of course, on bigger ships, like aircraft carriers, they have laundries on them. Didn't have any laundries there. Once in a while we get some fresh water, and then we get a freshwater shower. But most of the time it's all salt water. But you know, complaints. We got 3 hot meals a day, and we were kept busy. The only one disciplinary problem they had on the ship was the seamen. They went to a supply ship, and they drew some paint, and so they had a bright idea that when they take cargo off the ship, they could form a line, and so they had this line formed, and they took this paint, and they took it and threw it overside. Nobody was watching, I guess. So they, Article 15 is the petty officer in charge of that group. So that's the first time I saw bread and water, and they gave him 3 days of bread and water and busted him. And I got promoted, by the way, a couple times on the ship. Went from 3rd class to 2nd class in around, I'd say about 3 or 4 months.
Richard, when you would get a promotion like that, did additional responsibilities come with that?
No.
It
Well,
was
no. No different.
time in service kind of,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, so time in service. They were pretty lenient. The Navy's pretty lenient anyhow, service. You know, they have high rank, a lot of ranks, a lot better than the Army. Of course,
Well-
they specialize, you know, as specialists.
When you went back to Pearl Harbor then, is that when you separated from
Yeah.
the ship?
They took people off of the ships so they could carry pre-commissioned troop vessels back in the States. You know, they kept building ships and needed a crew for them. So they took people from combat and then sent shipped back to the States. So I was selected, fortunately. And so I went back to the States on Oregon, the troop ship, and ended up in Treasure Island, San Francisco.
And from there?
Stayed there for about a couple of months. Never got off the place because they claimed that they wanted you to be there in case they give you some orders. So, but we kept busy. Went there after a short leave at home. I went to Philadelphia Naval Yard in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I was there doing VJ Day. And then from there I ended up in Norfolk.
At some point, you had gone to the pre-commissioning.
Yeah, that's in Norfolk.
Mhm.
That's where I went to pre-commission. Pre-commission for a light destroyer, and learned how to put out fires. They had a fire chief from Chicago, who was the guy that run that fire school. And what they do is build a fire out of gasoline, and then take you and make you with no firefighting gear or nothing, just your uniform. Go in there and fight that fire, and you get kind of warm. But that was the firefighting training in Gunga.
That sounds like it got kind of warm is about the understatement of the year.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, I got through pre-commission, got out of that after VJ Day, and was assigned to YTD 225 tug. It was a seagoing tug, and as a captain by a civilian. And what we do is, as ships came in, we'd assist the other tugs and bring them to the dock. It was the tug was a diesel electric, similar to the locomotive diesel electric. They have diesel locomotives, and it was all controlled from the cab, from the pilot house. So you had nothing to do. Once you started the engines up, that was it. Just make the engine go, and then your job's over, unless they had a problem. That's pretty good.
And this was on the seagoing tug. You had
Yeah.
mentioned that you had 24 on, 24 off
Yeah.
duty cycle.
Hmm?
24 on, 24 off duty
Yeah.
cycle. How did that go?
All
Was
right.
that pretty good way to
Ended
go?
up, when you work, you get up in the morning, pretty much 8 o'clock, and we'd be through by 3 or 4 out in the afternoon. So we actually never got called up, but we stayed in the billets, and if they needed us, we'd come and go. Because the tug was just tied up right next to us on the billets.
Mhm. So then about a year later, in May of 46, you were discharged.
Yeah.
What were your plans?
Hmm?
What were your plans?
Plans? I went to work back, got on May, I think I went back to work for about a month. That same old job. I decided to go to school. So by July, I enrolled to school and took my first course in geology, which wasn't in my field, but it was a course. And so I settled down to go to West Virginia University.
The
So
the West Virginia Mountaineers.
Yeah, right. They gave you, the GI Bill gave you $75, and I was only making $100 a month at the city job. So you go to school and end up, I joined the ROTC, Army ROTC, which had a feature of they gave you $27 a month clothing allowance. So I ended up with more money than I was making for the city, counting that $27 plus 75 is over $100.
Mhm. So by now you were 22, 23, 24 years old.
Yeah.
Had you been married
No,
by then? Okay, so still not married. Uh-huh.
no.
And what was your degree? What were you seeking? What kind of degree?
Double E electrical engineering. But unfortunately, that was bad news, because I got bad. I had taken a business school course in college, which didn't have any math. In order to get an engineering school, you got to have math. So my first year in college was making up my math from high school. And college math is a little different than high school, because they lay it on you fast. So maybe my background in math wasn't as good as it could have been.
You were commissioned in 48 and all of a sudden you were a second lieutenant?
Yes.
Was that kind of weird after being an enlisted man?
Yeah. Yeah, I was assigned to reserves, and I knew what they do in reserves. You know, they enlisted people have an obligation a couple of years, and so when they get out of the service, they send them to a unit. Regardless of what their so-called MOS is. So they might be infantrymen assigned to an ordnance unit and know nothing or little about ordnance. And so I was assigned to, I can't recall, something to do, it wasn't signal, it was something else. But I ended up in an ordnance unit, and I was the company commander of that unit in the reserves. And of course I was signal, so I knew very little about ordnance. The only one ordnance in that unit was the colonel, and everybody else was oddball people. So,
Oddball, okay.
but I knew when they started calling reserves up during the Iraq War, I knew what they were in for.
And you had been called up yourself for the Korean
Yeah,
War.
I was called up as an individual to go to Korea. Not to go to Korea, but because of Korea.
And
Or join a Korea War.
you were at Fort Gordon for
Yeah.
the period,
Yeah.
a part of the Korean War. What were you doing there?
As a basic training officer, and they were short officers, and so I was assigned to a battalion, and I just went from company to company as a cycle. The normal cycle out there was 10 weeks, if I remember right. So in a cycle, they would go 10 weeks, and then the company would get 10 weeks off, 2 weeks off, and then they started another cycle. But I wasn't fortunate. So when the company ended their cycle, I go to another company and be in their cycle. So I
Never seemed to get any downtime,
never
huh?
got time.
What was your last assignment in your Army career?
Fort Monmouth.
Another Signal Corps
Yeah, I was
location.
operations officer in the enlisted school, and they had a large enlisted school during the Vietnam War. There were as many courses going 24 hours a day, 3 shifts. So it was a busy place.
So you were married in '52. This was, you were still at Fort Gordon then?
No, in San Luis Obispo.
Did you marry a California girl then?
Yeah, no, Georgia. She came out on a train, and we got married in a chapel in San Luis Obispo. by
So you
Catholic.
had met her at Fort Gordon.
Yeah.
It's a Georgia girl, this is an Augusta girl?
Yeah,
So that's what brought you back here, huh?
yeah. Well, we bought a house here. I went to Korea in 1960 or 59, and we bought a house here. So, and she stayed here while I was in Korea. And so when I got out, we had this house. We came back, and her family is here. So,
And is this the house you bought?
no.
Okay.
I was over Kingswood. It was so small because only 3-bedroom. We had 4 kids. I've run across this place, so we bought it.
Now, you had 4 children. This is 3 girls and a boy.
Yeah.
And are they close to you now as far as distance?
No, they. Well, I got a daughter that lives in down here, and one daughter's in Jacksonville. My boy's staying here. He's recently divorced, and was jobless. About 3 years ago, he's still essentially jobless. But he stays here, and my youngest girl, is in Alameda, California, and my other daughter is in Jacksonville, Florida.
Do you do much traveling anymore to go out to California and down to Jacksonville? You have grandchildren?
Yeah, I have 6 grandchildren.
Are they grown men and women or
Oh,
young
yeah.
young men and women?
One's almost 40 years old, I think.
Oh, you may have great grandchildren then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What are your hobbies, Richard?
Well, right now, not much of anything. I put around carpentry work, fix furniture with the brakes and all that. But recently I'm not slowing down.
Taking it easy, huh?
Yeah.
Richard, when you think back on your time in World War II, what is your most vivid memory?
Most one?
Most vivid memory?
Oh. Well, just like I mentioned, that smell, and that's it. There's nothing outstanding. I mean, You know, everybody's do your job and stay out of trouble.
Richard, have you heard of the book The Greatest Generation by
Mhm.
Tom Brokaw?
I haven't,
What do you think of that book?
I haven't read too much of it, but I've read a couple articles in it. I haven't read it all.
What do you think has captured the imagination of America about your generation?
Well, I mean, we're, I guess, we had all come up with the Depression, and we saw a lot of problems, you know. Fortunately, I was fortunate my dad had a job, and a lot of people didn't have jobs. And of course, when I was in 8th grade, I got into newspaper business, delivering newspapers, and I see a lot of people. Some people had a lot of bad deaths because they couldn't pay their bills. But, and also a lot of, you know, the coal mines attracted a lot of foreign people. We had a lot of foreign generation of coal miners, Greeks, Italians, and you name it. We had them, and they lived close to us, and they were all pretty close to themselves. But we learned a lot about culture. We learned that Italians eat spaghetti all the time. That's all they eat. And Greeks have their festivals, and so forth. And you know, a lot of the kids too. A lot of, you know, children of those parents.
Richard, if you had something that might be called a philosophy of life, what is that?
I want to try to do some help, be helpful to people, and try to be kind, and not complain, and never get excited.
Are these words of advice you would give to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren to live by?
Well, work hard, try to work, and, you know, be helpful, and that's why I always was raised, you know, was always doing something like being helpful, mowing the grass, taking the garbage out, try to help people.
Richard, do you have any final comments
No,
about the interview or about your World War II
No.
time? Well, it's been oh, go ahead.
well, I say, most of these people, our group, never talked about our service, whether it's good or bad, or, you know, they'll always hear about people talking about war stories, but you very seldom ever saw, at least I didn't, hear people, you know, talk about bad. I knew bad things happen, and so I knew myself. So a lot of people kept out to themselves, and of course they didn't have any psychiatric treatment like they do around today, I guess, or try to be. Because a lot of people are pretty good.
Well, are you glad that you did this
Oh yeah,
interview?
yeah.
Well, I am too.
Okay.
I'm delighted to have met you, Richard, on behalf of the Library of Congress and the Augusta-Richmond County Historical Society and a Grateful Nation. Thank you for interrupting your life with World War II. Thank you for a career in the United States Army. And thank you for allowing me to capture your oral history on this video.
Okay. Thank you.